In this video, I make a custom Funko Pop of legendary Brazilian footballer Pelé. Have you ever been looking for a particular Funko Pop, only to find that the one you want doesn't actually exist? Well, whenever this happens, I say to myself, no pop, no prop. I'll just have to make it myself. One of the first things I need to do is to find reference pictures of kits, and for the Pelé Pop, I've decided on the World Cup 1970 Brazil kit. This particular World Cup was held in Mexico, with Brazil beating Italy 4-1 in the final. So I know what colours and features are needed for the figure. I'll make a super technical drawing. Then it's time to go shopping for a base figure. I try to find a figure with the closest hairstyle possible to the figure that I am customising. Now that my base figure has arrived, the first thing I do is remove the head, as this makes it a lot easier when painting the figure. To remove the head, I put the pop in a bucket of hot water for about 5 minutes or so. And if it's been in for long enough, the head should pop right off. Any second now. There we go. Now it's time to change the V-neck shirt into a round neck. So for that, it's milliput time. I cut 2 equal pieces from each stick and mix together until fully blended. I add a thin piece of the blended milliput to the area I wish to mould. I use a small rounded end sculpting tool to create the neckline. Then I go in with a cocktail stick to clean up any milliput residue from the neck. Once the milliput has cured, I smooth it out so that it is flush with the rest of the figure. I use emery boards for this, as they are usually really cheap to buy. So now it's time to prime. I will be airbrushing with Vallejo Grey Mecha Primer, which I have thinned just a little bit with Vallejo Airbrush Thinner. I will be priming over everything, as the base figure has a beard and Pelé did not. I start with a few light mist coats before building up to a heavier wet coat. With priming complete and everything dry, the next step was to mask off the areas that I didn't want covered in yellow paint. I used blue tack for the more awkward areas like the hands, arms and neck. I was really struggling to decide on which yellow to go with for the shirt. The reference pictures of the Brazil kits always seemed to be different shades, which I thought was just from differences in the cameras used at the time, but then I found out something very interesting. During Mexico 70, the Brazil kits were being supplied by 2 different manufacturers, Athleta and Umbro, so it is possible that there might have been a slight shade difference. I ended up going with Vallejo Game Colour in gold yellow. It would have been much easier to use the model Air Yellow as they spray straight out of the bottle, but I really liked the gold yellow the best, even though it had to be thinned to be able to spray it through the airbrush. Once the yellow paint had dried, I masked off that whole area and airbrushed the shorts. I went with light sea blue, which is a beautiful colour, and it sprayed out so smoothly. It was much more forgiving than the yellow. While that was drying, I got on with spraying the head. I used dark brown for this, as it is a really lovely colour. I could mix colours to get the perfect shade I need, but I prefer ready mixed colours in case I need to do some touch-ups later on. After more drying and masking, I airbrushed the hair. Then it was time to do some more, you guessed it, masking. This was so I could hand paint the detail on the neckline and sleeves. After all that had dried, I used blue tack to mask off the areas around the neck, arms and legs so that they could be painted. All that was left to paint was the socks, boots and the football. And once everything was dry, I airbrushed on a few coats of varnish. I use Vallejo Premium Satin Airbrush Varnish, which I thin 3 parts varnish to 1 part thinner. The satin varnish gives a really smooth and professional looking finish, and it also helps to protect the paint when adding the decals. But before I add the decals, I need to put the head back on. Here is the main drawback with removing the head. You have to get it back on. I use a craft knife to make the hole a bit larger and the neck a little smaller until they fit back together. One of the most fun parts of doing football pops is creating decals. I use Mr. Decal waterslide decal paper and I make the decals in Affinity Designer. You can find most team badges and manufacturers' logos online, which can then be made into decals. I also made decals for the eyes and eyebrows, as it looks a lot better than my attempts to paint those features back on. I apply the decals with Microscale Industries, Microset and Microsol. With the decals applied and dried, it was time to varnish over everything with another coat or two of satin. The figure is finally finished, but it still needs a box. I created the box in Affinity Designer with a box template I found online. I then printed out the box designs, laminated them, and carefully cut them out. The clear window was repurposed from another Funko box and everything was stuck together with double-sided sticky tape. I reused the bubble from the original box, and with that, the figure was complete. Here's the final result.